Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new series here for my channel. This is Cybernary, and at the request of a couple of people that I have played with in the past, I am putting together a short, I'll try to make it a short, tutorial on the traditional Iron Golem farm. Now, this is becoming a very popular farm over the past year or so because it is fairly easy to make in SMP, in the fact that it doesn't require a lot of redstone. It does require a lot of blocks, however, but you can build this pretty much anywhere in your world, and it will provide you a constant supply of iron in, while it's up and running. And all you need is some villagers, a whole bunch of blocks, and some patience, because this is a big build. It takes a little while to do, especially by yourself. As you can see, we're flying around one cell of the build. You can have as many of these cells as you would like in your farm, but you need at least one to be able to generate iron golems. So first off, I would like to go over the general specs of the build. What we are doing here is we are building a village to our specifications so that the game will spawn golems in either of these two spawning platforms. We got this level and we got this level. And they can spawn anywhere in this 10 by 10 room on either level, and the water will push them down into the bottom trough and then push them along to our killing chamber, which is right down there with our hoppers, as you can see. And we'll get into how we're going to go about killing them. There's about 3 or 4 really good methods. But first off, let's talk about the general build. This is a 20 by 20 block square. The reason we do 20 by 20 is because water will travel for 8 blocks. Well, we also do 20 by 20 to make sure that we have big enough space for the golems to spawn in, obviously. But we like a 20 by 20 block because water travels 8 blocks before it stops flowing. So we've got source blocks along the back wall here, and as you can see, those are all flowing 8 blocks in and then stopping at our hole. So if we have 8 blocks over here, we have 2 blocks open here and 8 blocks over here, and then our wall, count all that up, that's 20 blocks wide and 20 blocks wide the other direction. So we have a 20 by 20 square. Now we've got 2 layers here to maximize our spawning platform, our spawning pads. Each of these outer sections, these outer pods, are going to be where we're going to put our villagers. And as you can see, we have our doors here that lead into our bottom section. Now, the reason that the game will register these doors as actual doors in a village is because out here they can see the sky. In there, they can't. The game will recognize this as a village when you have enough doors that get registered as a village door and you have enough villagers. So let's go over a couple of stats real quick that I've got written down over here, and we'll get to that contraption in the back in a minute. Alright, so each cell, and again I'm calling that one village a cell, will produce 5 to 8 iron every 6 to 8 minutes. Every 6 to 8 minutes the village will check to see if it's got it's got all the requirements needed to make it, to qualify that as a village. And if it does, and it has enough of everything that it needs, then it will naturally spawn an iron golem. And as you'll see, I am on peaceful mode here. They still spawn in peaceful. They don't require, it doesn't count towards the mob count. It doesn't matter what difficulty you're in. If you've got villagers and you've got doors and everything adds up, then the game will spawn a golem. Okay? The game requires 10 or more villagers and 21 or more houses And the house represents a door with one side that has sky access and the other side that does not, to spawn a golem, an iron golem. The other thing that is very, very important, is that we'll get into here in a little bit as we're building a second one of these, is that any villages that are within 64 blocks of the center of this village, the game will merge both of those villages into one. So if I was to build another one of these cells right next door to it, the game wouldn't count that as two different villages. It would count that as one, and half the time I would get golems spawning in this cell, and the other half I'd get golems spawning in this half. So it'd be a waste of a build. Now, as you can see, this takes up a lot of blocks. Now, the hardest thing isn't going to be your blocks. It's going to be getting your villagers in and getting them into the pods. But we'll get to that in a minute. What you need to build this is at least 23 stacks of some kind of building block. 23 stacks, more or less, will build you that blue and white building with the yellow pods on the outside. Now, it could be cobble, it could be clay. I'm doing this out of wool just to help demonstrate and allow people to be able to pause and count blocks if they'd like. But I don't recommend wool, and we'll get to that why in a minute. You are going to be using some lava probably to kill off your golems, and as you know, wool and lava don't really mix. So 23 blocks. It can be all glass if you want. It can be all cobblestone if you want. Completely up to you. There's not any requirements as to what blocks you can and can't use when you're building this. It does require 48 doors, so make sure you've got plenty of wood. If you were building this in anything after 1.8, I believe, is when they allow you to start stacking doors. And then, of course, this transport trench. If you're going to be doing more than one cell, then you'll need a transport trench to move the golems away and to kill them off. Now, if you're just going to have one, then you can just dig that straight down and have your killing chamber, a good 16 blocks away from your cell, and you should be fine. Because as long as it's not within that, I think 16 to 32 blocks of that cell, the game won't even register that golem as being part of it. And when it checks again to see if it needs to spawn another one, it will. So, again, just a couple of stats here before we get into building and going over some of the specifics of how this works. And we have talked a little bit about how it works, but we'll get into a few more details here about it while I activate this cell. As you can see, we don't have any villagers in our pods. That's what I'm going to do right now, is I'm going to add some villagers, and I'm putting some water down just so we don't have to worry about anything spawning in here mob-wise. You're going to need about 4 villagers per pod. You can have more if you'd like, but 4 is the minimum. And depending on what version of Minecraft you're playing on or your server's on, you might be able to get away with just putting 2 in here and then having the villagers spawn more or breed more, because as of 1.8, the rules for the specifications for what the game needs to spawn villagers has changed. In pre 1.8, say basically 1.7 and below, you could put 2 villagers in these pods, and the fact that there's so many doors and so little villagers would make them spawn more, or make them breed more villagers, because in 1.7 and before, all the game required for villagers to breed was, is this village big enough that we need to make more villagers? They would basically do a count and say, okay, well, there's only 5 of us, but we've got 20 doors or 30 doors here, so we need to basically repopulate our village, and they would start breeding and creating more villagers. Now, with 1.8, that has changed. They have added the requirement of the villagers, just like other non-hostile non-hostile mobs, basically cows and sheep. that they have to be basically happy to be able to be breeding. And so the way that the villagers get happy is they either have a successful trade with a player, or certain villagers, if they're doing the jobs that they want or are needing to do, the game has told them to do, which, like for a farmer, after 1.8, they'll go around and actually harvest crops and replant wheat. And when they do that, that makes them happy. And if there's another farmer that's successfully happy as well, then they will breed. So it's a little bit more complicated to breed in 1.8. But that doesn't mean that you can't still build this. There's other ways that you can get villagers. You can find a nearby village and transport your villagers from that village to this village using minecarts and minecart rails. They are the most successful device that I have used to transport villagers. You can use water streams if you'd like, but not necessary. The minecart rails are an easier method. Another method, if you are in 1.7 or older version of Minecraft, you can set up a villager breeding machine, where basically you've got yourself enough doors and 2 or 3 villagers, and that they will constantly sit there and crank out baby villagers, and then the baby villagers will grow up and leave the system, and so they will never stop growing villagers. And I'm not going to go into details on a villager breeding machine because, for one, it is outdated. It is only on 1.7 or below, and 2, there are plenty of tutorials out there on a villager breeding machine. Now, third, and while we're talking about this, we've got everything we need over here for this village or this cell to start spawning golems. We've got our villagers, we've got our doors, and we may, when we come back, we may actually find a golem or 2 down here in this chamber. So we'll see what happens. Now, the third and probably the best method of gaining your villagers, especially 1.8 or beyond, is the curing station, or basically taking zombie villagers and curing them. And what we've got here is a device that many of you may have already seen. This black block right here represents a zombie spawner. So basically you're going to need to go hunting around looking for a zombie dungeon and keep that spawner intact, and then build this contraption around that spawner. Now it's important, I mean, I've got constant daylight set on this world right now, so I don't have to worry about that, but it is important that you place plenty of glowstone or torches around this machine, because the way this machine works is it relies on only these 3 or 4 spawning pads to be the only spaces that are dark enough to spawn a zombie. And what will happen is, as you know, or if you don't know, half slabs are considered a full block by the game. So if the game's looking at this this pressure plate right here that has the glowstone, the redstone lamp underneath it, if it reads that and it sees that it's got, consider this to be a solid wall, that is 2 blocks right on top of each other. This is 2 blocks right on top of each other. And what we would basically have is this as well. That 1 block space right there is completely dark because it's got blocks surrounding it all the way around. Okay, even though we've got space here, it has that we can see through. The game reads the half slabs as a full block, and this 2 block area right here that I'm pointing at is a completely dark 2 block cell or 2 block space that the spawner will read and say, okay, I can spawn a zombie right there. And the same thing goes for that one and for that one. Now what happens is, as soon as it gets spawned, it lands on the pressure plate, the glowstone lamp lights up, and our piston raises up right here. So basically lights up the cell, and it moves the piston so that you can see his face. But he's blocked off. He can't go anywhere, right? See, I can't move. I've got a block above my head. I can't jump over that, and I can't leave left or right. So at this point, you'd walk up. Okay, are you a zombie villager? No, you're not. Then you'd sit there and kill him. He'd die, and it'd turn into a spawnable pad again. Now, if he is a zombie villager, you get yourself a potion of weakness, make it splashable with some gunpowder, toss it on your villager, and then feed him a golden apple. And if you do this correctly, you'll hear a loud bang, and he'll sit there and start to shake with several particle effects going on. You give him about 5 to 10 minutes after that, and he'll turn into a regular villager. At that point, you get yourself some rails, transport him up to your to one of your 4 pods on the outside of your village, and you continue doing this until you get all 16 villagers that you need to populate your Iron Golem farm. It can take a while. You better have a very good supply of gold, because golden apples are not cheap. That's 8 gold bars each apple. So yeah, that will take you quite a bit. But it's either this or find yourself a village and use up a lot of iron transporting villagers over rails. Now, it may be that this is the zombie dungeon that you find is way farther away than the village. You're going to have to use your own judgment on that. So that's your different. That's the different ways that you can go about getting villagers into your pods. All right, and now I don't know if you guys saw or not, but we have ourselves a golem. He spawned. He spawned because we had enough villagers, we had enough doors, and so the game checked that and said, okay, well then we need to spawn a golem to protect all these villagers. He fell down into our trough, and then the water sources pushed him along into our killing chamber. Now, as we get into our killing chamber, there's a couple different things you can do here, and I've done 3 or 4 of them. There's 2 or 3 others that I've seen that people have done. The first couple of golem iron farms that I built, I had lava along the base here. The last 15 blocks of the trench. And I'm not going to do it all, but basically you do that on both sides, and then you place lava along these. You place a couple source blocks of lava, and this basically creates a lava blade that the golem will sit there and travel through as it's getting pushed along. And then if you do it for 15 blocks, this is only 8, but if you do it for 15 blocks, then that will take out 90% of the health of the golem. If you want to use it as like an XP farm or something and come down here and just start slashing up golems to get XP as well as iron, then you can do that. Now, that's a lot of signs and a lot of work. These days, I just create myself a lava blade right down here, right above where they're standing, and that's all we really need to do. 2 sources of lava and 6 signs, and as you can see, you will get 99% of the drops because you're below, when they die, you're below the lava by 2 blocks, and there you go. You got yourself some iron and some poppies or roses, depending on what version you're in. And if you want to build it out of glass and be able to come down here and watch them die, that's cool. You don't have to. You can completely close it off and send your items through the hoppers into an item elevator or to your base or what have you. So lots of different options that you can do there. Some of the other options that I was talking about, I've set up a piston that's right about here on this block here, right at their head level. And I've had water streams that keep them pushed right to the center. And then on a daylight sensor, once a day, that piston will extend for for the rest of the nighttime and crush them in their head. Now, I've seen others where they'll have a water basin down here at the bottom, and they'll have a dispenser that drops some TNT into the water once or twice a day, and it blows them up. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about killing an Iron Golem, remotely and automated, in an automated fashion. I like this because it's the simplest and doesn't doesn't require a lot of redstone and is very easy to do. So I'll leave your killing chamber up to you. You can get as creative as you want or as simple as you want. Also depends on how many resources you've got and where you're building. You see, we've got ourselves another customer coming right here. And as you can see, if he was, if I had the lava there, his head would be dragging along inside the lava there. But yeah, this works just as well too. So, all right. So we've gone over the basic structure. Again, a 20 by 20. We do want this chamber in here to be 4 tall, because we need one block for a water source, and then 3 blocks high for any golems that are going to be spawning in here. I put torches down just to make sure that we have enough light, just in the off chance we get maybe a zombie spawning right next to the door or something like that. And I have color coded this a little bit with the wool just to kind of break up what the build looks like, with the different aspects. The floor is white, the walls are blue, and then the villager pods are yellow. And as you can see, we do want our villager pods to be about a 4x4 block, just to give us enough room for the water and the 4 villagers. Excuse me, one other quick thing I want to mention is that the reason that we have an elevated source block in each corner of the spawning pads is, if you were to put source blocks all the way along this wall right here, then the way Minecraft works with water physics is that it will replicate that source block in front of itself all the way across, and before you know it, this entire pad will be nothing but source blocks. We don't want that. We want this to be flowing water that flows towards the center. So as I go about building this one over here, I want you to recognize that I am doing an elevated source block in each corner, because we don't want source blocks at the same elevation all the way around, or else that'll be bad news. Okay, last but not least, right before I get started on building my second golem, my second cell, I told you I would get back to this little tidbit here. Any villages within 64 blocks will get merged into one village. If we wanted to increase our output, we would want to build another one of these. We couldn't build it right next to it because it's within 64 blocks of this village. The center of this village is right here where these holes are. So we need any other villages we create to be at least 64 blocks away from this. 65 blocks. What I've got here is my trench, or my transport system, is about 32, 33 blocks to my killing chamber. Now, I do this for a reason. I do this so that I can build a second one on this side that is also 33 blocks away. Now, if you do that, then, it doesn't have to be 33. It can be 40. It can be 50. Just as long as it's not less than 32, 33 blocks away, you won't get in any danger of these villages merging when you build a second one. Because if they merge, again, if this one merges with that one, then that means that the game will sometimes spawn a golem here and sometimes spawn a golem here, but never both at the same time. So that's something to remember when you're building. You want to make sure that your distances are far enough apart that they don't merge, but not so far apart that it becomes a headache and you don't want 60, 70 blocks this way and 70 blocks that way, because then you get into the fact that they won't be loaded at the same time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and put down some water and get this side going. Again, water flows for 8 blocks, so we're putting down some signs to keep it flowing only in the one direction, and basically just counting it out 8 blocks back. Actually, on this last one I'll do 7, because the signs will stop it, and that will keep my water sources pretty close to being even. So That's really all you need to do to keep the golems moving along this. And if you'd like, you can cover this up. It doesn't need to be completely open. You just that way you don't have to worry about mobs falling in or anything like that, and you getting weird drops inside your system. Especially if you wanted to build a filter or something to get rid of all your poppies and roses, because trust me, you will get a lot of poppies and roses, depending on what version you're running of Minecraft. So if you want some kind of filter, there's plenty of tutorials out there on how to build an item filter to filter out your flowers and drop them into a cactus or a pool of lava or whatever you'd like. So, alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on building this, my second cell. As you can see, basically what I did was I built that one from scratch, and then I built my trench and used the trench to space out where I want my second one to be. And I've got the hole for my floor, and the easiest way to go about starting from this point is to count out 8 blocks from the center here. That'd be 6, so there's 8, and then this would be our wall. And you just do the same thing for the sides, and if you're counted correctly, then your blue wall will be 20 by 20. So if we were to count this is going to be, we're going to count the center here. Okay, so this will be 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so that means we've got that half done, and that means this half should be good too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, yeah, we're good. We've got ourselves a 20 by 20 block, and that should be all the counting you really need to do. Well, I say that, but there'll be some more once we get up to where we're doing the villager pods. And then you just basically fill in your floor. And oh, the one thing I didn't get into when we were talking, and I'll talk a little bit about this as I'm building, you don't need to sit there and go along the horizontal plane when building your second or third village. You can go vertical if you want, and there's plenty of times that I've built 4 cell Iron Golem farms. In fact, one of my more popular ones on Woodycraft, back on the Bravo survival server, was a 4-pod Iron Golem farm, or 4-cell Iron Golem farm. Well, basically where I built the one that you see and the one that I'm building now. But then I would go up about. I took the 4 corners, and basically built up about 70 blocks, and did an exact duplicate of the build, 70 blocks up in the sky. And I did it on both sides. I did it on this side and I did it on the other side. And that will definitely increase your rates. Do remember that when you're trying to keep chunks loaded, chunks are loaded from sky to bedrock. So sometimes it's better if you build vertically instead of horizontally, because you won't keep, if you were to try to space out 4 of these in different directions, the chances of you keeping the chunks loaded would be slim, unless you had several people on in your area all the time. So it's better if you build this vertically, and the most I've ever gotten has been three cells in one footprint, or basically one 20 by 20 square. I had to dig down quite a bit and create myself a pit to do my first one, and then basically build two on top of that. Because if you think about your sky level and how much space you've got until you have to stop building, then the fact that you've got to have these things 65 to 70 blocks away from each other means that the most you could possibly do in one vertical space would be 3 cells. So, and it's fairly easy to keep 2 cells on a horizontal plane like this loaded in one chunk. It's when you start expanding beyond that it gets to be a little bit more difficult. Okay, so we've got the first floor of our general spawning pad built. The next thing I need to do is I need to start working on those villager pods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count 6 in here, and you don't need to do this. You don't need to change the block that you're using. I'm doing this for visual representation only. We've got 6 blocks here that are going to be where our doors go. We've got 6 blocks here, which is where our villager pod goes, because we want a 4x4, and if you count the wall on either side, then that's 6. And we've got 6 blocks here that are for the doors, the other side of the doors. Okay, 6, 6, and 6. 18 plus the 2 outer corners is 20. Right? Pretty simple. So I'm going to change these 6 blocks here just to represent where our villagers are going, and as a visual representation, keep things a little bit simpler. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is put down some torches and the water. So, like I said, I like to put down plenty of torches along this path here, along this wall here, just to make sure that our area is lit up as much as it can be. I've never had any problems with mobs spawning inside here, mainly because of the water, but you want to discourage anything from spawning as much as possible. So, alright, so let's go ahead and build up our villager pods. And then our walls here. Again, I'm just sitting there counting 6, 6, and 6, because as long as you keep thinking about that number, then you should be fine as far as where your counts are going to go. And we'll come in and fill in the doors here in a minute. Alright, so the villager pod again is 6 blocks wide and 6 blocks long. Since we've already got our wall, then we're just going to build this out by 5 blocks and fill this in. And as you saw in the other one, I used a lot of glass. You don't have to use glass if you don't want to. You can make this a complete solid wall. I will tell you this: when I was transporting a lot of villagers, I would drop myself a block of dirt right there, and then I would bring them up through the trough, or whatever my rail system is, I'd sit there and bring them up through here, and then once I got them up here, it was fairly easy just to change my rails to go to whatever pod that I was going to go to. And but I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go about doing your getting your villagers up here. That's probably going to be the one thing that you spend the most time on, is villager acquisition and transportation, because they take the building. This doesn't take that much time at all, even if you've already got even if you don't have your resources. Let's face it, I mean, a chest of cobble, if you've done any kind of mining at all, shouldn't be that hard to come by. Unless you're building a lot of these. I've known guys who on certain SMP servers who try to build like 20 or 30 of these cells, and because their whole idea on their whole plan on the server is to be the guy with iron, and they're gonna sit there and be the supplier of iron for the entire server, and they just want to be churning out blocks and blocks of iron every hour. So I think that's a bit excessive. You don't want to oversaturate your server with iron, because then you're basically shooting yourself in the foot and making iron too easy to get. If you build a couple of these, enough for yourself and then maybe enough for some trading, then you'll do good. I was doing glass here. I never really had an issue of it. On the couple servers that I've built this, I've had plenty of iron to do whatever projects I wanted to do. I mainly did it because I like to do a lot of things with hoppers, and as you know, hoppers are very iron expensive. I also built a couple of tree farms because I needed a lot of wood for those hoppers. But I still had plenty of iron to trade with. Not so much the fact that I was constantly trading, but occasionally when I got a stack of blocks, iron blocks, I'd go ahead and trade it with some of the more wealthy people on the server. But that was a while ago. So this is just a great thing to have in your little tool bag of builds, because regardless of whether you're playing a single player survival world or you're on a server, it's just a good build to have in your pocket. Let's see, do I have it? Yep, we're doing this right here. So if now we're building our second floor, and we're coming over here to the center, and we're going to count out 8 blocks, and we're going to build our little hole for the golems to fall through, and then from there you should be able to count out 8 to the wall, and if you did, you built it correctly. And I know this video is running a little long, but it is a tutorial, so I did want to make sure that I covered all of the different aspects of it, including different ways to get your villagers and things like that. This is almost done, so we'll wrap this up and put our doors in, and water and villagers, and that'll be all she wrote. So I do encourage you that if I have left something out, or if you guys have questions about this, please do leave comments. I will be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have about the mechanics, about how this works, what changes they have done in 1.8, because there have been quite a few as far as how villagers behave and the mechanics behind the villagers. I know several people have done videos on those, but you know, as far as how it's going to impact our iron farms, you know, the changes that they made will not impact this farm. If you were going to build an iron trench or an iron foundry in 1.8, I would advise you not even to consider it, because the way that those different farms work, they use stacking villages as a principle to manipulate how much iron, how many golems spawn. And let me tell you, when they work great. They're phenomenal as far as outputting iron, and I've built a couple of them. But you know, they are a lot more resource intensive. You have to do things in a certain order, or else, as far as, especially when you're setting up your villages and placing down the doors, because there's a lot of doors to be placed when you're setting up a trench or a foundry. So Just a lot more work goes into them, but before you even start, make sure you know what version of Minecraft you're playing on, because in 1.8 they won't even work. And in some instances, depending on the server that you're playing on, they won't work either. And that really just comes down to how many villagers are already loaded on your server, and if a trench, if there's already a lot of villagers loaded on your server, then a trench isn't going to work. And the problem with the foundry is that the foundry absolutely has to be built at spawn. It has to be the first thing that gets loaded by the server whenever the server boots up. And if it doesn't, then it will break as soon as the server reboots. But just because it requires so many villages to be stacked on top of each other, and if you don't have that on the onset, then it will basically just turn itself into one massive village that spawns golems, once every 6 to 8 minutes. So nothing too surprising about that. Now, with all that said, this farm doesn't rely on stacked villages. It doesn't have any fancy redstone or anything that is going to manipulate the way the game reads villages to increase the output of how many golems it spawns every few minutes. So you don't have to worry about this this design not working in 1.8. It will work in 1.8. I've built it in 1.8 snapshot servers, and it works fine. The only thing that has changed as far as this farm in 1.8 is how to breed villagers, and because of that, it's just made it a little bit more difficult to get the villagers in and get them into these outer pods. So, but if you can get either a spawner or a village itself to then you should be able to populate or get your villagers into these pods. Now there is kind of an altered build of this farm that includes building a villager breeder on top of it that uses a lot of the farming aspects of the villagers. And if you want to look that up, you can. It does require a little bit of a modification as far as the top of this farm. It creates another layer on top of it that you basically put villagers, farmer villagers in a setup where they're constantly making wheat and breeding more villagers. So that's something that you can look up. It is out there. That is only for 1.8 and above. As we get further along with 1.8 and further, I'm sure there'll be other designs. But that is basically it. I hope everything that I went through made sense. This is a fully functioning cell now, and if we wait a minute, I'm sure we will see an iron golem spawn and come down through there. While we were building, we got half a stack of iron. How's that for progress? It's pretty good, huh? And that was only about 15 minutes of work. 15 minutes of work building this got us half a stack of iron from the other farm. So if you have 2 of these, you can do the math. In about just hanging out in about an hour, you can easily get a stack of iron, if not more, from 2 of these. So again, my name is Cybernary. If you have any questions whatsoever about this build or the different concepts and stuff that I talked about, the mechanics behind why this works, there you go. See, told you. Our second farm just produced its first iron golem. So if you have any questions about this, it produced 2. That was fast. Okay, cool. If you have any questions about this, again, please leave a question in the comment. I will be more than happy to answer any and all of them that you guys have. Again, I'm doing this video as a request for some of the people I play with. They said that some of the other tutorials on how to build these iron farms and why you build them in a certain way was confusing. I hope this cleared it up. The game mechanics, once you understand what the game is looking for, then it's pretty straightforward. Again, always make sure that the outside of these doors have sky access. I would say that you can build these underground. I've built them underground before, but mine, all of these outer blocks outside of the doors straight up to the sky. Put glass over the top if you want. Glass does count as sky access, but they need to be able to see the sky. So, all right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap it up there. I appreciate you guys spending the time and watching this video with me. And again, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please do leave a like. If you have not subscribed yet, I would recommend you subscribe so that you know about any future videos that I'm posting. And I guess that's about it. Until next time, have fun.